Nope.
There
Now
we
we
go.
are.
Now.
Good afternoon. This is the New York City Board of Standards and Appeals Public Review Session for November 10th, 2020, 2 p.m. session. No public testimony will be permitted during this review session. The first case is zoning calendar, continued hearing items, item number 31, 2020-35 BZ, 13618 Maple Avenue, Queens.
Okay. We have received a couple of submissions. We also received a new letter of objection from a neighbor, and it's regarding height of the building. At the last hearing, the board received a very thorough explanation of factors that go into allowing buildings to penetrate the CFR's horizontal plane. The applicant was also requested to find out from FAA what does AMSL mean and where that measurement is done from, where is that measured to, specifically with regards to, is it to the 0.0 NAVD or to a local sea level or some other point. The applicant's aeronautical consultant reached out to FAA for further clarification, and a letter was submitted dated dated October 22nd, providing a very thorough information as to how FAA analyzes. So from that letter, what I gather is FAA requires all airport layout plan elevation points to be referenced to NAVD 88. According to a Northeastern Regional Geodetic, I think, advisor for NGS and NOAA, NAVD 88 zero elevation is generally not equal to an actual sea level elevation. There is no relationship between AMSL and NAVD 88. Referencing elevations to NAVD 88 indicates that the elevations are in accordance with FAA Advisory Circular 150-5300-16B. In the letter that was submitted by the applicant and its statement of facts, the applicant further states that because the FAA no hazard determinations are based on surveys submitted with NAVD 88 vertical datum and provide elevations relative to the LGA airport reference point established pursuant to the above cited FAA advisory circular, which is 150-5300- 150/5300-16B, the elevation stated in the FAA no hazard determination as AMSL are in fact referenced to 0.0 NAVD 88. So based on that, the statement of facts has been revised, facts and findings have been revised to eliminate the reference to AMSL, and the AMSLs have been converted to NAVD 88. There's no change in the date, there's no change in the number, it's only replacing the AMSL to NAVD 88. The proposed plans also have been revised to eliminate the reference to AMSL. And based on that, the height, the height number remains the same. The only difference is that instead of it being 270.5 AMSL, it's 270.5 NAVD 88 and such. And the revised plans also have has also incorporated the environmental notes for DEP comments. Ms. Benke is here, so I please confirm that. Apart from that, I really had no additional comments, and I have to say every time Mr. Pittman provides any information, updates us, I learn more and more. So it's really, I thank him for reaching out to FAA and getting all that information. But from my end, I think the analysis is complete and I am comfortable granting the special permit, but I would like to hear from the other commissioners.
Mm-hmm. So thank you. So I just want to, so it's interesting that the FAA, the actual FAA, works in NAVD 88, but the problem is that their letters of determination are in AMSL. So now I'm confused because because AMSL and NAVD 88 are not the same numbers, which is determined. It's not in this location, it's not a big difference. It's like a point something, but it is a difference. So this like kind of confuses me more. At the last hearing, we said you have to have both coordinates shown on the drawings because the FAA determination is in AMSL and the DOB works in NAVD 88. And now it seems like they're saying everything will, that's what the drawings show, everything will be in NAVD 88 and the drawings now are just also above curb level. But there's nothing to tie in to the FAA determination letter. So I guess I'm confused now about that. I thought we were going to get two values on the drawings, even if it's sort of redundant, even if AMSL, whatever that's measured off of, translates into NAVD 88 to some number, at least you would see the slight difference between those two numbers. So now I'm confused because how will FAA know that this is a complying set of drawings if everything is in NAVD 88 instead of what their determination indicates? That's my first question. The second, but at the same time, the information is super helpful because we were all struggling with what's this average mean sea level thing? Is it the Triborough Bridge? Is it, is it the Throgs Neck? Is it Staten Island? Like where is this measured off of? And so NAVD 88 is a datum that applies to the whole area, and it's just 0 is 0, and it doesn't fluctuate the way mean sea level fluctuates.
Yeah, I believe the NAVD 88's actual measuring point is somewhere in Quebec.
Whatever, yeah. So, and it used to be, for instance, there used to be a Sandy Hook measurement point, or there used to be a Brooklyn measurement point and a Manhattan measurement point. Each one was different. And so NAVD 88 sort of cured that, and everything is measured off of whatever that magic location is, right? So, so that's my first set of questions that was raised by the submission, though as I said before, that Mr. Pittman and Mr. Colgate have been super careful to be responsive to our questions and are spare no amount of interest in pursuing the scientific question. But so now I want to go back to the hearing previously, because the testimony at the previous hearing was so detailed. I actually needed detailed and complicated. I actually listened several times to the video, and I know Commissioner Sheta did the same. And again, because it was so complicated, I actually transcribed it. So I listened to Mr. Pittman's testimony in slow motion and transcribed it so I could really try to understand what he was getting at. And so what I was trying to understand was, he said that this building is proposed to be built below the 34-to-1 approach level. Mm-hmm. And he said that as long as you stay below the 34-to-1, it's not interfering with air traffic, provided that if you are in this special single engine inoperative surface area that's located that's about 300 feet on either side of the center line of the runway, as long as you're outside of that, you can stay below 34-to-1. But if you're inside of the center line, 300 feet of that center line, you actually have to keep buildings down to a surface area that's more like 62.5-to-1. And that's to deal with planes that have lost an engine and have to come in for a very low altitude landing. So I get that. My understanding is that this building is not within that single engine approach surface area, that it's outside of it. But so as Mr. Pittman was going on, he said, as long as you stay clear of that, you can continue to build along the approach surface and stay at 34-to-1, which is an ideal. Mm-hmm. And then he adds to that, and I note that that's a testimony that occurred at at 0.3 hours, 18 minutes, so that I could find it easily on the video. He said, so this building, the subject building, could have been built taller. It could have, and then this is the part where I got confused. He said, I think it could have penetrated the 34:1. It could have gone up to 380 feet above mean sea level. But they chose, the developer chose not to do that at Mr. Pittman's recommendation. And so, and his recommendation was to keep it below the 34:1. So that's my first question. I thought everyone has to stay below the 34:1 unless you're in the single engine area. And unless you're in what he talks about later, this category 2 area, which is 50:1. But what I don't understand is if you stay below 34:1 and you're complying with the regulations, then is that allowing still a taller building than what is proposed here? Or is what's proposed here at a lower level than 34:1, which was recommended by Mr. Pittman, so that it allows for what he describes as the required navigational performance option approach, using equipment like satellite navigation and so on, which would allow for a tighter sort of triangle accessing the runway, but that you need to maintain it much lower altitude in order for planes that are in bad weather to land more quickly. So one of the things that he said was the reason that there was a recommendation to keep the building in the more like 270-foot height range that this one is proposed at, rather than 340 feet, was because from an engineer's perspective, it's better to maintain this option of future instrument landings and technology that would permit many planes to land in bad weather. You know, for instance, in good weather, apparently the planes land every minute a plane can land, but in bad weather, it could be several minutes for each plane to land and create backups and other kinds of difficulties. So my question is, where did the 340 feet height concept come from? And is this building being built under the 34:1 only, or is it being built way under the 34:1 at his recommendation? And what was his recommendation actually based on? And then I have lots of other notes, but that was my specific question.
So as I understood the 34:1 rule, and as you said, is, there are two aspects to it. There's a 34:1, and then within the 34:1 is that approach part of it.
The single engine.
The single engine,
out.
right. Right. What is it called? It's called the 62-1/2 engine inoperative kind of thing. So
right.
if the building is in that zone, then you have to be below 1:34. But if you're not in the one engine operative zone, then you can penetrate the 1:34. But the recommendation is to stay below 1:34, like you said, to allow for future navigational
so that's
technology.
Yeah.
So I think this building is below 1:34. So I still didn't understand the issue around if it being 1:34. Why would that be a concern then?
No. I'm trying to understand his science and his math, right? Okay. I'm not saying this building is too tall. I'm trying to understand his statement where he said the building could have been built to 380 feet above mean sea level, but I, engineer who does this for a living and works with the engineering community, recommended that it stay, maybe it's the 34:1, but that it stay at the height that's proposed, so as to allow for future development of aeronautical methodologies, equipment, and landing systems, basically. And so what I'm trying to understand is it just that this building is like grazing the 34-to-1? Or is it way down? Is it like 50-to-1 or something like that? Or something? And if it could have been higher than 34-to-1, therefore 380 feet, then where was that number coming from? Like what approach surface allows it to be 380 feet tall? And is that in excess of the 34-to-1 or what? That's the part where I didn't find the connection made in the testimony. And so I got confused. Okay, so that's what I need him to walk us through that. It's not about this building, it's about understanding the methodology. We have other cases and I want to understand, and most of them are at LaGuardia Airport area. So I want to understand, and they almost always involve runway 31.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it.
Okay, Commissioner Otley Brown.
No comments.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Shetta.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Bear with me. I got the same confusion. I did actually listen to the testimony more than once, and I thought that the slope or the surface that was cited in the testimony wasn't 1 to 34 or 34-to-1. I thought it was 143-to-1. Actually, I recall that. That's what I hear. But I will start from the submitted drawings, the revised set on page 3 of the PDF. This is BSA 01B-01.
When was this
MD
submitted? Which one are you referring to?
This is submitted October 23rd.
Okay. The drawing.
And
You're
this
referring
is
to the drawing.
page,
Okay.
yes, the drawings, and this is page number 3 of the PDF. It's BSA 01B.
Okay, got it. Thank
you. In which the applicant is trying to explain to us how did he get to like the height of the building. And my understanding from the last hearing was the following. There are 2 categories, or I would say criteria, that could be followed in order to determine the height of a building that's in close proximity to the landing path of a flight. The first one is the 43 or the 34, whatever, either of those. But the one that's close to the 30-something. And the second one, and the first one is associated with a fully operating plane, meaning that the 2 engines are working, the plane is capable of flying and flying high quickly. The second one is associated actually with a plane that got a problem and one of the engines is down. And of course, if you consider a plane like this, it's gonna descend quicker. So you need to be careful, make sure that any building in that route is low enough for the plane not to hit it. And that's why if you encounter this condition, if there is a building that's aligned with the center line of the runway or it's within close proximity to it, I thought the number is about 300 feet either way from the testimony at the last hearing.
Yeah.
That surface, the 34 or the 43, turns into a more flatter surface, which is 1 to 62 or 62-to-1.
Yes.
And when the statement that indicated that this building could be built higher to, I believe what was mentioned is elevation 388 or something like that, I got the impression back in my head here that the applicant followed a more stringent criteria. Because if somebody tells you that this building could have been taller or could be built taller, automatically you get the impression that, oh, they followed the more stringent criteria, and the more stringent criteria here is the 1 to 62 or the 62 to 1. Now, when I'm looking at this submission on the page I just indicated, and we're not talking about rocket science here. We're talking about, you want to get the height of the building, you want to get the highest point of the building. You have a reference point at the airport, which is 200 feet of the end of the runway. You know the elevation of this point, and then you go with the service. That's simple. And this is like very simple math. Every foot, every 34 feet horizontal, you go up 1 foot. That's what 34 to 1 means. And 162 to 1 means every 62 feet, you get up just 1 foot. So if you follow that logic, you know the distance between the building and that reference point, you can just apply simple math. You start at elevation 6.7 according to that drawing, and then you see that horizontal difference between the building location and that reference point, which I believe here it's 9,839 feet. And you see how many 34 feet distances within this. So you divide this by 34, and that gives you the height above the reference point. And if you add this to the elevation of the reference point, you get the top elevation of the building. Of course, what we're talking about here is within that distance that described on the plan. If you go like far from the center line, you get some variation depending on whether this plane, when you cross it, whether it's that cross line is horizontal or it's not. But again, I got the confusion because last time I thought they followed the more stringent criteria, which is according to what was described, is that 1 engine down, so, which is the 62 to 1. So what I was anticipating in this submission is actually the 9,839 feet distance to be divided by 62, not 34. But in this submission, it's divided by 34. So I'm kind of puzzled here. So what I'm looking for, I don't think I know more than an expert, but what I'm trying to say here is I'm trying to apply what is said during the last hearing, plus very simple math. If I'm missing something, please explain to me what I'm missing. That's all. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, and so maybe, and some of it is also when I look at, X marks the spot on the diagram that's on that same drawing what is it? Sorry. Drawing BSA 01A01. It's hard to know where that 300 feet off the center line is. So I can't tell whether it's falling within the single engine out issue or whether it's outside of it. And it's true that there's a description of the 50 to 1 slope, which we know is, I think that's the statutory maximum. And then the FAA does its own analysis and comes up with other maximums, right? So you could do as of right a 50 to 1 in, I guess, outside of the single engine out area.
If you look at the figure on, I believe the page you just mentioned, the plan.
Yeah.
If you look at the center line from the runway and you look at the location of the building, you see that arrow where it says 4,000 feet.
Yeah.
It's like 4,000 both ways, from both ends.
So it's 2,000.
At the building location. So if you scale that, you divide it into 2, that's 2,000.
Right.
If it's 2,000 either way, I believe if I take a midpoint in the 2,000 and look at the building, the building seems to be close, and I don't know why there is no kind of distance that's shown there.
Yeah.
You could have simply took like a distance ladder and put that the building is offset 400 feet from the center line. So it's not 300, done. But right now it's kind of like, I'm being skeptical. I want to scale this, but this drawing is kind of like, it's not good quality to scale it. And I hate to scale drawings when it comes to matters
Can
like
I, sorry, we should refer to the aeronautical study that was done as part of the original submission. It is unfortunately in the void folder. It's dated 4/15/2020. Go to the statement of facts and there go to page number 79. And from there you can see it shows in relation to the runway and to the approach surface where the building is exactly located. So it's off the center line. It is not on the center line.
No,
No, I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying it is on the center line, Vice Chair. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is this: we're not experts. We're architects, engineers, lawyers. We're not like aeronautical engineers. So if somebody's going to present to us a diagram like this to support his point, please make it easier for us to read it and understand it. That's what I'm saying. I'm not claiming that the building is so close to the center line or it's on the center line. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying just give me a distance. So number is much better than tons of photos. When you give me a number and I look at it, even if the scale is like distorted, and I look at the number is a number is a statement. But over here, I can tell it's 2,000 feet and I have to split it and I have to split it and I have to scale it. And then I'm not sure.
yes, understood. Right. I don't actually see the dimension off the center line, even in that study, but it's.
No, it's not given. It's not given, but I'm just using the visual reference point. It's not on the center line.
No,
So-
no, the issue is it 300 feet off center line? Because that's what we were told is the single engine out zone of 62.5 to 1. That, I think that's what Commissioner Sheta's getting at. But I think also the mystery is how did the 380 foot potential height come about?
Yeah.
Not that this height proposed exceeds FAA's determination. That's not the question. It's how did that 380 feet come from?
So, when I was looking at that, I was also referring to this study, and maybe Mr. Pittman can, if he is going to attend, he can help me answer. So as part of the report, I think the report page 30, which is with regards to LGA LNAVZ runway 31 instrument approach procedure. It shows a figure 21, and in that the statement is the subject building is located within LGA runway 31 LNAV instrument approach procedure as shown in the above figure, which is figure 21. The maximum allowable height within the LNAV procedure is 390 feet AMSL. And when I read that, I thought that 380, he may have meant 390, but that's where that number is coming from, because it's saying the maximum allowable height within the LNAV procedure is 390 feet.
Right.
But
So
maybe he can clarify that.
Yeah, I think in the end, he needs to clarify because there are many factors. All of these approaches come together. And so one is allowed, but the other one isn't allowed. So there's an answer. And apparently the answer was that the building could be built to a bigger height, but he recommended to his client not to do that for a good reason that had to do with the future of aviation as to runway 31. That's really the question.
Right. And because in that it goes into LNAVZ, then there is an LNAV, VNAVY. So these are all different measuring points, and based on VNAVY, procedure surface area permitted maximum height is 457, whereas based on VNAV, I don't know if it's LNAV or VNAV because it keeps changing, but LNAVZ, the maximum height is 390, whereas VNAVY, the maximum height is 457, and LNAVY, again, 390. So it, like you said, it keeps varying based on where you are measuring it. And I guess using those factors, 380 was considered like the maximum you could go, but then the advice was to
But
keep
we don't
it
know,
at
so
low.
let's have Mr. Pittman tell us instead of us trying to figure it out. Okay. Commissioner Sheta, did
Oh.
you have more comments?
No, I
Okay,
just wanted
actually,
to,
can I,
like-
sorry, go ahead, Commissioner Sheta, just finish what you have
yeah,
to say.
I just want to, I want to clarify that NAVD is called National Average Geodetic Datum.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
this is, and it should be some difference between AMSL and NAVD depending on the location under consideration. So
Yes.
in Brooklyn, it's different from Manhattan, different from Queens. It depends, different from California, of course. So AMSL, it varies from location to location. NAVD, the reason they came up with it, it's something that's national, covers the entire country. So
Yes.
I just wanted to mention that.
Right. Okay. Okay.
All right. Commissioner Shibata?
Nothing further from me. I'm interested to hear the clarification, but I was satisfied with this application.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Benke, do you have any additional comments with regards to the environmental? You're satisfied with what has been submitted?
Yeah, I can confirm that they added the notes regarding the vapor barrier that DEP requested in the 2020 remedial action plan. And if there's any changes to that vapor barrier, there will have to be an amendment approved by DEP.
Okay. Okay, thank you. All right. Can't hear you, Ms. Matias.
Tony, you're muted.
Sorry. Sorry about that. 2019-74 BZ, 11251 Northern Boulevard, Queens. And I believe we have to reopen this, right? For you to discuss it.
Yes.
Yes, even
so
if
the-
we have a review session, we have to reopen. Is that correct?
Right,
Mhm.
so,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
motion
Okay.
to reopen, Chair Promoter,
Aye.
Commissioner Chanda,
Aye,
Vice Chair Chanda, I'm sorry.
that's okay.
Commissioner Otley Brown,
Aye.
Commissioner Sheta,
Aye.
Commissioner Shabeta.
Aye.
Okay, proceed.
Okay, I can take this one because I'm the one who wanted to reopen it.
Mhm.
So having learned so much on the prior application with Mr. Pittman's testimony, he raised some issues that I wasn't aware of until we heard Mr. Pittman's testimony. So I would actually like to hear from Mr. Pittman a similar analysis of what he did for this Northern Boulevard site. And I think it's most relevant to talk about what those things are after we hear from him on the prior case. That will inform how the questions on this case. So I just felt like he had opened issues that we weren't aware of before.
And what were the issues specifically you would like Mr. Pittman to respond
No,
to?
so it's rather, I would like to hear the responses to our questions in the previous hearing, previous case. So that'll inform what kinds of questions to answer on this quest, because at the moment we're operating out of a little bit of lack of adequate information, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole that's the wrong rabbit hole if he says something that's quite different from what the prior testimony was. In other words, you know, when he was talking quickly at that session, and he was talking to lay people, right? And so he tried to make it as simple as possible, and in the process may have said something that contradicted something else, and we weren't aware of it because we're not familiar enough with the subject. So it's more like, let's clear up what happened in this last one, and then it'll inform the kinds of questions we can ask for this one.
Okay. Any comments from any of the other commissioners? Okay. All right.
Okay. New case, item number 33, 2019-278 BZ, 9201 Fifth Avenue, Brooklyn. This is a parking reduction.
Okay. This is a new application. We have proof of service on the initial application and proof of hearing notice to officials. Community board approved with conditions: 20 in favor, 1 against, 1 recusing. The conditions were, it wasn't quite clear to me. I'll just read out as it was stated. One was recommend a turnaround area for vehicles dash 92nd Street, a redesign to include the ability for vehicles to enter and exit lot without traffic issues at 92nd Street. So that's the comment. This is a corner lot. It is in C23-R64 district, most of it, and a portion of it is in the R5B. It's in the Bay Ridge Special Area District. Pursuant to zoning resolution 77-11, it permits the application of zoning district C2-3R6B use regulations to the entire zoning lot, as more than 50% of the area is in the C2-3R6B district and the area does not extend past 25 feet. Now, the zoning resolution 75-11 also, it applies to zoning laws that were existing on December 15, 1961. So I would like the applicant to confirm if the zoning law did qualify that cutoff date and state it in the narrative.
Sorry, Madam Chair. I'm sorry.
Yes?
Did you mean 77-11?
Yes, sorry.
Yes.
70, yeah.
I thought you said 75-11.
I may have misspoken. I'm sorry. I meant 77-11. Sorry. That has to do with the split zoning lot.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Currently, there is an existing one-story eating and drinking establishment. The applicant is proposing to build a new building, a 3-story with cellar, a commercial that would be occupied by a commercial use on the ground floor and cellar, use group 6B, and a community facility use, which would be primarily use group 4, ambulatory diagnostic or treatment facility on 2nd and 3rd floor. The total floor area proposed for the community facility is 13,980 square feet, and the rest of the commercial zoning floor area is 5,980 square feet. The applicant is proposing an at-grade parking for 6 spaces, and the parking would be accessed from a curb cut on 92nd Street. Both 92nd Street and 5th Avenue are 2-way streets with, I think, on 92nd, it's 1 moving lane in each direction. There is no on-street parking. So the parking requirement that the applicant is saying that per zoning, the parking that would be required on the site would be 50 spaces, but the applicant is proposing 6 spaces. I'm a little confused by that analysis because for the proposed commercial floor area of 5,975 square feet, the way the parking though the parking requirement for both the community facility 6B and community facility ambulatory care is 1 per 400, there is a caveat which says if in the commercial floor area, any commercial use that is located in the cellar is not counted towards the parking. So using that, the commercial floor area is 5,979 square feet, divided by 400 gets us to 14 spaces that would be required, which is less than 25 spaces and would be waived per zoning resolution section 36-231. Now, for the proposed community facility floor area, where that is 13,979 square feet, 400 spaces would be required. That equals to 35 spaces that would be required. Now that can't be waived under zoning resolution 36-231 since it is more than the cutoff of 25 spaces. So based on that calculation, I think 35 spaces would be required for the site and not 50 spaces. That is just my analysis. The applicant can correct me. I'll accept my mistake. However, if the entire building is proposed to, we don't know if it's going to be one end user or is it going to be multiple end users. If the entire building is proposed to be community facility, ambulatory care facility, then of course a 50 space makes sense, and that is above the threshold of zoning resolutions 36-231 cutoff point. Now,
Sorry, cutoff point for what?
Okay, so let me just read what 36-231 is. 36-231 says, in the district indicated, C23 being one of them, the parking requirements set forth in section 36-21, which is the 1 per 400 requirement, shall not apply to commercial uses in parking requirement categories A, B, B1, in this case it's B1, or to permitted community facility use if the total number of accessory off-street parking spaces required for all such uses on the zoning lot is less than the number of spaces set forth in the table. And according to that table, in C23 district, it is 25. That's the cutoff point.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
In other words, if as of right, they have
Right.
25 spaces,
Right.
or under 25 spaces, they wouldn't be required to have any parking at all,
Right.
right? My understanding is that they can't, the way the language is phrased is it's for all such uses. So you can't separate out the commercial use from the community facility use. You have to combine it together. And if whatever the requirement is for all of them combined, that's the parking requirement. And if it all combined equals less than 25, waived. If it's
Okay.
25 or go, yeah, Commissioner.
Okay.
It just seems to me like this is the classic that they put forth to us over and over again, which is that it's required to have 50 spaces. They want to use the parking reduction that they can get from us to get down to 25 spaces, and then they're going to go to DOB and they're going to waive everything. And then they're going to provide 6 spaces out of the goodness of their heart. We don't even know why, because they didn't give us a parking study.
Right. I agree.
I think-
I agree with you.
And I think we've done this before on another case, just a month prior to pandemic. I believe it was Palatnik's case, where they want to use for everything.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's a little bit like deja vu all over again.
That is
Exactly.
Yes, I agree with you.
First of all, I think that was just one of the analysis, but I'll accept my misreading of it. The application, I really don't think we should have scheduled it for hearing because it's incomplete. The application is incomplete for us to review. As Commissioner Otley Brown pointed out, they have not provided any information to help us make any of the findings. There's no evidence of any of the findings that's been provided. Good faith is just one line sentence that's been provided. We look for more than that. The statement of finding is non-existing in my mind with regards to ZR 7301, 7344. The applicant was asked in December of 2019 notice of comment to provide parking demand analysis and accumulation study throughout the day for weekdays and weekends for all users in the building. The applicant needs to justify that the parking demand for the entire building will be met by the proposed number of parking spaces. None of that has been provided. And, so I don't even know where to start our comments because we don't have anything to base it off.
Right.
And the applicant needs to also respond to the community board's concern with regards to the turnaround and other things. Because 92nd Street is a narrow two-way street with one moving lane in each direction, and there is a school across the street.
Mhm.
There's a middle school across the street. So there are bus parking, other things. So we need to understand the whole circulation pattern, traffic movement, and the in and outs. So
Right. So, and I just want to say before we go to Commissioner Holly, who really should come next, is in the defense of why these applications come to hearing when they seem like they're incomplete. At a certain point, staff just says they responded to my notice of comments inadequately, and either we keep this sitting around behind the scenes at the office, or we put it on for hearing and we let the board sort of give direction. But what often happens is we learn applicants don't listen to the directions of the project managers. So we'll have an applicant say, I don't want to do that thing. I'm going to wait until the board tells me that I have to, because maybe they won't tell me that. And so here our project managers are trying to save the clients, never mind the applicants, but the actual clients, months and months of time and money. And then either it's the applicant representative or perhaps the client who says, I don't want to, right? And so it ends up making the case take much longer. In this case, though, I'd have to say that we've already made our position clear for years. Going for this second waiver from DOB is completely un-okay. And so back to the drawing boards, if you really want a waiver, it sounds like you need to provide 25 spaces. So even if that's the right number, I'm not even sure that's the right number, but anyway.
Right.
Okay, so maybe you go on to Commissioner Otley Brown.
Yeah, Commissioner Otley Brown.
I agree with both of you. I think that this application is incomplete. There's no parking study. We have no idea what the demand is in parking spaces for this. They did not address the community board questions, most specifically about the vehicle turnaround in the little parking area. I'm not even sure how it works without a lot of backing up and turning, like little quarter turns till you can reverse yourself. There's a third floor roof deck that is adjacent to the residential on one side. How will that be used? What are the hours? Will there be lighting? How are the residents of the adjacent building going to be protected? All in all, I think that, we need to be very firm with this applicant that we want a parking study. We want a parking study, or perhaps we should just close this case and move on.
Okay.
That's all.
Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Shetta?
Thank you. I'm not going to repeating what is said, but I agree with all that was said. I believe this application is very premature. I don't like the double dipping thing, meaning that a waiver from the BSA from whatever is required to 25, and then a waiver from 25 to whatever they want to provide from the DOB. It shouldn't be working like that. I believe this is an abuse for the regulations. I didn't see in the application anything that supports the required waiver or supports the amount of parking spaces, which is 6 spaces, while the required number of spaces is about 50, except for just a statement from the community, one of the community board members that said most likely people, if you provide parking, that would motivate people to drive to the facility. But if you do not provide parking and people drive, the parking in the area around that facility would be messed up, that traffic. So, and I did look at Google Maps. I didn't get a chance to visit the site, but I did look at Google Maps, and it sounds like parking in this area is very tight streets. Some of the streets are narrow and parking is like the Mission Impossible. So I'm not sure how can we put a facility like this with required number of spaces of 50 and tolerated to go to just 6 spaces without even a parking spot.
Mhm.
I'm not in favor of this request at all. Thank you.
Yeah, I was there over the weekend, and even on over the weekend, like there, first of all, no parking is allowed along the curbside of both 5th and 92nd. So that means whatever parking that is available, it's in a much less constrained space, in a much more constrained space, I'm sorry, and therefore the parking demand is very high. On-street parking demand would be very high. And it's not an area where you have new office buildings with or public parking garages. So people are by and large are looking for on-street parking spaces. That this is an older neighborhood. So there is a huge strain on the on-street parking. That is based on what I saw on a weekend. So, yeah, Commissioner Shibata.
Well, just to further a point, this neighborhood is notoriously known for having being congested, for people circling for hours to find parking. I was actually I was surprised to see the community board's response. Although I can understand why the logic behind it. I think it's a dangerous theory that because we don't have parking here, don't offer parking. I think that might not really work out to the benefit of that community. I don't want to be repetitive about everything else that was said. The only thing I would say is that I also visited the site, and I say this in regards to the parking study, and while it was still difficult to find parking there, it is nowhere close as bad as it is pre-pandemic. So I think that should be kept in mind for the parking study, that this is not going to just be about what parking is in maybe a week before a possible shutdown. So that's all I want to add to this.
Yeah, just for the record, I do want to add the building across the street, which is a commercial office building, does have a public parking garage. That's the only one I saw in the area.
As a public parking garage, or just accessory parking? Okay.
No, it said for public. The sign said for public. Okay. And it's accessed from 5th Avenue. Right.
So I just, this is a congested area, and we've done this before on not too far away, a similar, well, maybe about 2 miles away, but still around the same area. There was another similar type of application where they didn't want to provide parking. They were ultimately denied. The parking garages that are available, you're still going to end up having a lot of people driving from light to light looking for parking because they don't want to pay the $30, $40 that these parking lots are.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Thank you. All right. I think that's the end of the review session.
No more comments? Okay, good. So that ends the public review session. We now commence with the public hearing for November 10th, 2020, 2 p.m. session. The first case up is zoning calendar continued hearings 2020-35 BZ, 13618 Maple Avenue, Queens.
All right. I see Mr. Colgate.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Is Stephen Bai part of your team?
Stephen Bai is part of our team. I don't think there will be any questions for him, but he's available. He's on ownership. And I see Clyde Pittman, which I'm very happy to see, got through the technology to be here. So commissioners, Chair Perlmutter, commissioners, my name is James Colgate.
Wait, I have to
swear you in.
Okay, so raise your right hand. Anyone who's going to speak in your team?
Okay.
So do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before this board, and to respond honestly to board member questions?
Yes.
Okay, now you can proceed, Mr. Colgate.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Okay, so Chair Perlmutter and Commissioners, my name is James Colgate. I'm Land Use Counsel for the owner, 4201 Main Street LLC, and I'm with the law firm of Brian Cave Leighton Paisner LLP. From the comments in your review session, it seems as though there's two major issues here, or two main issues. I don't know if they're major. One is the issue of above mean sea level versus NAVD. That's one issue. The other, as I interpret it, it's the science and the engineering behind the FAA's determinations of no hazard, which establish certain points. And how did you get there? And what does it mean? And trying to get your head around what that's all about. That's how I see these two issues.
No. Actually, let's clarify that. No. So yes, the first question is the NAVD 88 versus the average mean sea level. That's
Okay.
one, and why you're not showing both designations on the drawings now,
Right.
because the determination, the FAA determination was in mean sea level.
Right.
And the other question is not about how the FAA came to its determination. It's responding to Mr. Pittman's very detailed analysis that talked about how independent of the FAA, the best practices among the engineering community make certain recommendations. And one of the recommendations that was made was not to build this building to 380 feet, if that's the correct number,
Right.
But to build it at the proposal. And this is more, it's not that it's a suspicion of the analysis that was done in this case. It's more to get more information for this board to be better informed. And we unfortunately have to rely on Mr. Pittman to be our professor. But it's also, as was pointed out by Commissioner Sheta, is we can't tell where the building is relative to that single engine approach
I see.
area, because there's no dimension that tells us, is it 300 feet or 400 feet away from center line, where you would need to drop down to 62.5 to 1.
Okay, that's absolutely.
Of course, I'm sorry, of course, just to clarify, we're talking about the transverse direction of that zone, not the longitudinal. I understand that a distance was given from the reference point to the location of the building in the direction of the center line of the runway, but perpendicular to that, I couldn't see like a clear distance to where this building is located from the center line.
Right.
Okay.
That's
So
yeah.
with that, let me do an introduction first. I will then turn this over to Mr. Pittman. I'd like to introduce the issue of the above mean sea level and NAVD. Mr. Pittman will go into more detail because he was the one who had those conversations with the National Geodetic Survey and all the people of the FAA about this. But what I understand, and I understand you want to see two numbers, the sea level and the NAVD, so that you can have both of them and compare the two. But what I'll say, I think Mr. Pittman will explain, is that the initial study, the aeronautical study that was submitted to the FAA, upon which they based their determinations of no hazard, utilized the term AMSL in what is later explained in Mr. Pittman's letter as a layman's term of AMSL to refer to NAVD 00, which, as Commissioner has pointed out, is in Ottawa, Canada, at the mouth of the St. Lawrence River, right? That's where 00 is, NAVD. And it establishes, like Commissioner Sheta said, that it establishes a national standard upon which everything can be measured. That is what the circular requires. That is what Mr. Pittman's aeronautical analysis was based on. He happened to use the term AMSL, but that's what I understand and why. If it's correct, when Mr. Pittman explains it, that indeed it is AMSL as cited in the determinations of no hazard really is NAVD, so that it's 296, 300 feet, whatever those numbers are, above NAVD 00, then I believe you will agree that the plans and the statements of facts, statements of findings are all correct, and that everything matches together. If there is some difference, we'll have to deal with that. That's not my understanding of where things are. I'll also say that if it is correct that NAVD 0.0 is the point at which all these measurements were taken, forget what those four letters are in these things, but if it actually turns out that that is where it's measured to, then there's no purpose in interjecting and bringing into any of this analysis the mean sea level around or closest to this site, because it's not a number that DOB uses. It's not a number that the FAA uses. It will be interjecting a datum that doesn't have a purpose in the greater scheme of things of trying to pinpoint where this building can be constructed to. So that's what I'll say. Yeah.
No, but this is the problem. The FAA determination of no hazard letter doesn't speak in NAVD 88. It only speaks in above grade level and above mean sea level. It doesn't, the NAVD 88 is not in its determination. And that's why we always have the two numbers on the drawings, one for DOB's benefit and one for us to have the assurance that it complies with the FAA's letter of determination of no hazard.
Right. And what I'm saying to you, and I'm expecting Mr. Pittman to say, and he's the expert in this, is that the determination of no hazard that says AMSL above mean sea level is in fact measured from 0.0 NAVD, and that AMSL in the determination of hazard is not accurate if what you're considering above mean sea level to be the local sea level of this area. That is not how the letter of no hazard was created, based on the inputs that were provided to the FAA. Now, if I'm wrong about that, you're going to be 100% right that we need to rethink that. But that is what I've been told, and that's what I'm expecting him to be able to explain. And his letter says that, I think. And then when you read the statements of facts, as Commissioner Shanda quoted me from, also say that. So I think we're all in order here. It's only a question of whether or not that FAA determination that says AMSL 296, 300, 301, AMSL, whether that's really measured from NAVD, and I believe that it is, but we'll hear from Mr. Pittman on that issue. So let's defer to him when we get there, but let me also introduce the other issue. I understand it's about the understanding how the FAA criteria apply these slopes and where this building is on the runway center line, and how and why there are statements in the aeronautical report that said we could have gone much higher, but we didn't. Mr. Pittman will explain that. But what I want to point out most importantly, at least from my perspective, is that whether or not the building site is 200 feet or 300 feet or 400 feet away from the center line, if the drawings that are submitted for the BSA approval, the one that go to the building department, don't indicate that dimension, that ought not to be a reason to require it to be changed, because it's not something that DOB cares about. It's not something that is important for what these final plans have to go back to DOB for. What DOB wants to understand is, where are the zoning lines? How are you exceeding the zoning? And has the BSA approved these plans to exceed those numbers? The focus of the architect's drawings in the plans, page 2 and page 3 of the PDF that were submitted, the focus was clearly on zoning with respect to setbacks, sky exposure planes, approach surfaces, the two approach surfaces that are in the zoning resolution, which are not the same approach surfaces as used by the FAA, but it's all about the zoning and how that relates back to the buildings department. And that is what is important from this. Now, baked into everything there, including the points at the top that we were told by FAA is our limit under the determinations no hazard, all that is based on an engineering and aeronautical report, which contains in great detail everything that ought to be in there with respect to everything that Commissioner Sheta or anyone else ought to be able to look at to see whether or not this building is a certain distance from the center line of the runway approach, and how that impacts whether it's 390 feet or 457 feet or whatever number of feet it is that the FAA could have permitted, that should be all baked into that science. And now I'm going to stop here because I'm not the aeronautical engineer. I don't want to step on his toes. He's a very knowledgeable person. And I think that he will be able to hopefully clarify us on these two issues. So Mr. Pittman, I would ask if you could unmute yourself and introduce yourself, and we'll go from there and see how this goes.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody.
Hi.
I guess I'll start with the FAA. When you fill out a 7460-1 determine or request for aeronautical study from the FAA, they will only accept data in NAD 83 and NADV 88. That's the starting point. So when you submit it, that's what they want, or they won't get the right answer. You have to give them a survey of what your heights are in NADV 83 and NADV 88. If you don't give them a survey, they will add 50 feet to the height, and they will move you in the 250 feet in the worst possible direction and do their calculations based on that. So when you get an answer back from them that says AMSL, we have to look back to the CAA, Civil Aeronautics Administration. When they were doing aeronautical studies, they were doing those under NADV 29 and NADV, I don't know, whatever the other one was, but it was the old versions of this. And they
National
were
Geodetic Survey, NGVD,
yes,
previous one.
the previous ones. And so when they were doing that, they used the term AMSL, AGL, ground elevation. Those are basically the terms that they use. So it is just nothing more than a carryover from one old form to a new form when they use the AMSL. And so AMSL in these particular cases means exactly what NADV 29 is. I mean, 88, excuse me. So they're the same thing. They're interchangeable. So when you submit a request in NADV 88, you get your answer back in NADV 88, what that limit is. Does that make sense?
But they change the term from NAVD 88. They write it as AMSL. That's what they do?
No. In a sense, they have to be doing that because that's the only way they would respond. So AMSL is the absolute height that you can get above mean sea level. That's what it means. And we've already determined that the AMSL, or the sea level, and the starting point of NADV 88 are not quite the same thing.
Right.
Am I not making this clear?
No, so
Okay, I think this added to the
again.
confusion. Yeah, this added to the confusion. So all this time we were going along with the idea that AMSL and NAVD is equal. So if there's a height limit of 400 feet in AMSL, it is 400 feet NAVD 88.
No. No. NAVD 88 and AMSL are different. And in this location, they're different by a tiny bit, like 0.43 or something like that. In other areas, they're different by a lot. They can be different by a few feet, right? And
2 feet and change, yes.
Yes. And so in some areas, we've experienced the 2 feet and change difference where, whoa, if you showed that same number in NAVD 88, your building's 2 feet taller than what the FAA expected. They are not the same number. That's the whole point. And what the conversation was the last time was, oh, but AMSL is a term or a datum that's taken from local points. So if it's the Throgs Neck Bridge, it's 1 point. And if it's, I don't know, Staten Island, it's another point. And what came up in that conversation was, well, wait a minute, maybe the FAA is using a point at LaGuardia Airport that isn't generally available on NOAA, because on the NOAA website, you can see what all the points are. Maybe there's a separate one that the FAA used. That's what got this all started. And we wanted to know what was their AMSL, what was it? So because their conversion from, if you submitted your application in NAVD 88 that said, my building's going to be 200 feet tall from NAVD 88, and then FAA says, we don't really work in NAVD 88, we're going to convert this to AMSL, then they're converting based on one of the local datum points, which all I can do is guess that it's the Throgsneck Bridge, but I don't know. And then we're sort of back to that same place we were before. And, you know, we were hoping that the conversation would clear that up. But I think in the end, we can't say NAVD 88 is 200 if AMSL is 200. It's not a correct statement.
At the airport, there is a primary control point and a secondary control points. I believe I covered those in the letter on page 2, showing which ones were which. And then I identified the location point of the NAVD 88 that was used to determine that the elevations of the runways are determined off of. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that starts out the point where the FAA starts from for a runway.
Mm-hmm.
They don't go in when they do an aeronautical study and do any checking on the values they have in their database. That starts the elevation of the runway. And as the gentleman said earlier, the calculations are based along center line and distance over to get the elevation that the 34:1 is starting 200 feet off the end of the runway. And that becomes the maximum height of the 34:1 at that particular point.
Right.
And so that is built off of the elevation of the runway, which is built off the control point on the airport. And these same control points that are shown on page 2, they're all referenced to the same standards. So when the surveyor goes out and gives you the elevation of the ground and the elevation of the top of the building by adding the height of the building to that point, then that is the overall AMSL, the overall elevation of the building.
Clyde, this is James. Let me ask you a pointed question, because this is what this is all about. And this is why it sounds like we're going in a circle, but maybe we're never going to get back to the beginning again. Here's my question. When I look at the determination of no hazard, we have 5 of them. It says 296, it says 298, it says 300 feet. And then it says AMSL, right?
Yes.
If I go down to 0.0 AMSL, where they're measuring from, is that NAVD?
They're measuring from it's measured from a control point that is referenced in this point at the airport.
So it's like 7.2 or 5.7. I don't remember, there's a number.
That would be the elevation of whatever that elevation is of that marker point, whatever it is. And I believe
But this is not the datum for it, Mr. Pittman. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
This is the point 200 feet of the end of the runway is not a datum. It's just a reference point where you start from and you go up with whatever landing service or takeoff service to get to the height of the building. I believe what the attorney asking about is, what is the datum for whatever elevation number is mentioned? And I believe what you're saying is AMSL, that you mean is NAVD 88.
Yes.
Let me just finish. I believe I cleared out all this mess. If you look at the most recent statement of facts, actually this is not the one that submitted August 26, 2020. Yes, this is the statement of facts. Yes, August. Go to the August 26, 2021. And go to page 81 of the PDF.
Page 81.
Page 81 of 143. So just if you have the PDF reader, just put 81 in that box and it will take you there. It
Of the
says
report, of my
parameters.
report?
Oh, no,
Yeah,
do you know what? You'll find it much faster, Clyde. This is actually your letter, and it's the attachment to your letter with the
This is under
NGS data sheet.
parameters and assumptions. That's what the heading says.
Do you see that, the NGS data sheet on your, attached to your letter? That's what he's
Yes.
referring to.
I can share my screen if you
Yes,
want.
the NGS data sheet. I have it in front of me.
Hold on one sec.
Oh, that's not page
Do
81
you
of
see
my
it?
PDF. Okay.
Yeah,
That's not what I thought it was. Sorry.
81 on a PDF. Yeah.
Yes. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. You see here, it says parameters and assumptions. These
Yes.
are the parameters and the assumptions of the study. And in this, it says the reference horizontal datum is NAD 83. We're not
Yes.
talking about the horizontal here. The ground elevation at the site is 60 feet and the requested building is 180 feet in AGL, above ground level. And then if you proceed, it says the ground elevation at the site is 60, height is 180. The vertical datum, yes, that's what I'm talking about. The vertical datum is NAVD 88. So whatever vertical elevation described in this study is taken as NAVD. And if you read here, right here, you see AGL, and then it says 240 feet above mean sea level. So it's referring to a sea level here, and in the next sentence, it is defining the sea level that's referred to, which is the vertical datum is NAVD. My understanding from this, and I do have some survey background, my understanding is whatever vertical elevation is given in this study is referenced to above mean sea level that corresponds to a vertical datum, which is NAVD 88. So that's clear from that. So whatever, when you look at the determination from the FAA and you see any vertical elevation, any elevation mentioned, and it says MASL, that means that AMSL is the NAVD. I buy that. But I would mention that, I would mention that probably this is close to be correct in Queens. Somewhere else, it's not. So AMSL and NAVD are typically different. And I would suggest that Mr. Pittman, when you use that terminology in the future, do not put AMSL, just put NAVD 88 and have them issue their determinations in the same reference, in the same data. That's much easier for us and for all other agencies that look at these determinations.
That's a good idea. If the FAA were willing to only work in the new datum, it would cure a lot of difficulties, because I do have to say that at this point, because we know that AMSL based on any local datum is different from average mean and versus NAVD 88, I can't comfortably say that the drawing should only have one value on them. They're going to be off by 0.4 or something like that.
Yeah.
And we have another.
They're going to be off by whatever, depending on the location. They're going to be off by a certain amount, depending on the location. And you know what? In other countries, I know that when you mention an elevation that's referred to average mean sea level, you have to mention where is that average mean sea level located.
Yes, yes. And we have another case that's coming right after this one, where we asked their surveyor to certify the heights, and the surveyor signed and sealed the drawings to indicate that he or she was approving of those heights in both NAVD 88 and average mean sea level, because I was very uncomfortable with the conversion that the architect had used. I wanted the surveyor to sign off on it for this very reason, that there's so much confusion about the difference between these two things that even the surveying community has trouble, and this is their specialty. So if, please, don't eliminate the AMSL, make sure that, unless you can get a new determination, which I don't want you to get from FAA, just add the AMSLs back on that were there before, that had been signed off by your surveyor, to indicate that it's taken off of whichever is your median point.
But Commissioner Perlmutter, then the height of the building will be wrong, because I mean, the surveyor can tell us how tall the building is and how high the average mean sea level is at Frog's Neck or whatever is closest. But if you're hearing from the aeronautical engineer that the FAA determination, when it says 300 feet AMSL, is measured based on its distance and slope, whatever, from the airport, that is and is in effect 300 feet above NAVD 0.0, average mean sea level at the St. Lawrence River mouth, whatever that is, then what does converting and adding some new information about the
Because you can't convert NAVD 88 even to even into average mean sea level. That's incorrect. And if the FAA is using AMSL incorrectly, it's a whole other subject, right? But you can't say that AMSL and NAVD 88 are the same. You can't just switch out the letters with the other letters and say, I'm done.
But you can't across the country because it's always different. But if the AMSL designation in this no hazard determination is utilizing as its mean sea level 0.0 NAVD, then you can, only if that's the case. And that's what we've heard from Mr. Pittman is the case. So that's why I want to be clear.
So Mr. Pittman, you're saying that somehow or other the FAA decided that 0.0 NAVD 88 is equal to average mean sea level someplace at the airport.
No.
Right.
So explain that, please.
Okay, what I'm saying is that they're using the term
Yes.
to mean to mean NAVD 88. They don't mean that it's an AMSL. That's just the way they have done it for decades, and it's a government agency, and I seriously doubt that anything Clyde Pittman could say is going to get them to change that.
Right. So this is quite confusing, because all of these 73, 36s or 66s that we've looked at in the last 5 years, we've had the conversion. All of them, I believe, have been around LaGuardia. All of them have two datum, one from AMSL, so it matches what the instruction is on the determination, and also in NAVD 88, so the buildings department knows what to expect, right? And all of them show a difference of between like 0.4, and in one case it was close to 2 feet.
And Chair Perlmutter, what I'll say is that is not how I understand it. This is the first application before you that was brought to you by me. I know a lot about elevations. I spent a lot of time at DOB worrying about the same thing you've been worrying about lately. And my understanding comports with Clyde's understanding, which is that when the FAA used NGVD of 1929, the term AMSL was used interchangeably because that's the way it is. And they don't just change their forms when they've abandoned the 1929 datum and gone to the 1988 datum. That's my understanding. And I pushed this over and over again. And now, because I know what this is, what it's supposed to be. Now, it may feel uncomfortable that there are all these other projects out there that have given you two because you've asked for it. They'll do whatever, the board asked for something, they'll do it. But if this is the right answer, so what am I supposed to do now if the right answer is that in this case?
No, it can't be the right answer that in this case. The answer is always the way it is, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm now you're asking the BSA, which has this very strange job.
Yeah.
Our strange job is to, let's say, sort of certify to the DOB that we're okay with the FAA's determination, and here's a set of drawings, DOB,
Right.
that you're going to allow them to build to.
Right.
And how can we certify to the DOB that FAA's determination that says AMSL is an NAVD 88 without something much more, I don't know, I don't know what to say. It's like we're being put in the position of being the what is it, analysts of the international datum system, right?
I believe that the issue here is this, that FAA is using the abbreviation AMSL in other way than it is used to be utilized.
Yes.
They are using AMSL as if it is the NAVD 88.
That's right.
This is not the way it should be used in the engineering/surveying community.
I agree.
The way it's used, AMSL is AMSL, and it depends on location.
That's right.
NAVD is NAVD, it doesn't change, it's something national, and it corresponds to just one location. That's why it's unique and not a change. I believe the change should start from this case. The way that's presented in the letter to them should be, number one, you describe the abbreviation-wise, everybody knows that US in caps mean United States, right? If you want to use US in a document, the abbreviation UCAP, SCAP in a specific document, a different way, you have to in bold, italics, big caps, you have to define that. What I'm saying in this submission, in this case, I haven't seen this defined. AMSL, it's not defined as same as NAVD 88. If it's not, then I would take it the way it is. It's average mean sea level, and it depends on the location. It cannot be the same as NAVD 88. That for me, it would be satisfactory if on the drawings, you provide us with a statement and mention that AMSL given on these drawings corresponds to mean sea level that's identical with the mean sea level utilized for NAVD 88, and have a surveyor sign and seal this.
No surveyor is going to sign. No surveyor will sign and seal it, because that's not what average mean sea level means, right?
But
So
if it's defined, if I in a document say US and between parentheses I say US here in this document mean John Smith did play soccer, period. Whoever is gonna read this document, if he understood US as United States, it's up to him. I did define it.
okay.
And let's just get over this, because yes, I understand. If you go back to FAA, we are not going to change it, but you could change it. When you present it to them in the next case, make sure that you make it clear like that. The AMSL I'm talking about here is the one that corresponds and relates to NAVD. And there is, I don't mind if you like continue describing that it corresponds to the mean sea level at this location. So anybody reads it, understand what it is.
Can
But the
I
way
ask
it's
a
written
question?
now,
Can I ask a question of Mr. Pittman? Is it possible to get a letter from the FAA just stating what you believe to be their position about these datum?
I might be able to get an email.
Emails are good. Just a statement from the person who like does these analysis saying, oh, we just throw these terms around interchangeably.
No, I think I have enough friends that I can get you an email.
That would be great. And then we would attach that reference to our decisions, because this is nuts. I mean, using a completely it's just improper usage of terms and datum. It's kind of scary even. Imagine here, like Commissioner Sheta said, in Queens, you're talking about a few inches. In another case we looked at, it was 2.5 feet. Not a joke.
Mr. Pittman, when you interact with FAA, do you interact with engineers or surveyors?
I interact with air traffic personnel that are assigned to do this. They're not
Oh,
engineers.
not even engineers or surveyors?
That's why.
No.
Oh, that's why.
That's why. So, and this is the reason why I never wanted architects to be the ones who decide what the height is, because they're not surveyors. And
it's like you're giving him $5 and getting back €6.
right.
It's like that.
So let me ask a question. If we can get Mr. Pittman to get an email from the FAA that says, yes, indeed, when you look at that no hazard determination and it says 300 feet AMSL, that's 300 feet above 0.0 NAVD. And we just happen to use the AMSL term because it's what we've always used. If we get an email like
Something
that.
like that. Can you,
And then
so
you
this guy, the guy who wrote this determination is Mike Helvey. Manager.
No, Mike Helvey is the supervisor. He didn't write it. He just signed it.
Okay, but he's still the supervisor. He's
It
the,
was probably Darren Clipper. I can get one from Darren Clipper, I'm pretty sure.
okay.
Yeah.
But
Yep, that's fine.
Darren's name is on there. It says for questions, please call Darren Clipper on there someplace.
okay. Okay, I mean, I don't know what else to do.
So let's just say, if we're able to get that email,
Yes.
and then if you look at my statement of facts where I describe quite clearly what we believe, which should match what that email says. And if you look at then the plans where we're crystal clear that everything is in the NAVD scale, then at least from DOB's point of view, there's one datum. It's all in NAVD, which is what they require from us anyway under the administrative code. Everything should work. It seems as though what's missing, the missing link, is some confirmation from the FAA to confirm what Sheda believes, Commissioner Sheda believes to be the case here, which is that they're using the wrong term. Because clearly, Chair Perlmutter is right. If they really meant AMSL, then there's a disconnect. There's something wrong here. And if they're using the term incorrectly, then Commissioner Sheta is right. And that has to be the only way it gets resolved. It's one way or the other. Either Chair Perlmutter is correct in that they're using the term correctly and it means something different, or it's that
Yes.
they're using the wrong term and really they are the same thing. It's one or the other. And Clyde Pittman and myself believe it's that they're using the wrong terminology and they really mean NAVD.
Right.
And that's what we're going to seek confirmation.
So the missing link is we need to see on the drawings the linkage between NAVD 88, which is what's required by the buildings department, and the determination of no hazard that says you can build to 300 feet above mean sea level.
But let me ask you that question, because if we get the email from the
Right. No, James.
Yeah.
We need on our drawings this linkage, and in our resolution, the linkage that we're
Okay.
relying on an FAA email that says that when they refer to this 300 feet above mean sea level, they're really saying the same, that it's also NAVD 88, and it's a malaprop, frankly,
a
right?
malaprop.
So-
Right. You're going back to
Mr.
the rivals,
Pittman,
Sheridan, right? Okay.
In your interaction with them, how do they interpret the A? Is it above or average?
It's above.
AMSL, above.
Yeah.
It's above
Okay,
mean sea level, yeah.
okay. So you know what? When you describe your datum in the submission to them in further, like in the cases to come, I would suggest for your time, to just preserve your time, write it like this. MSL off NAVD 88. So it's mean sea level of the NAVD 8. So it's, and then you could, between parentheses, you could write it as NAVD / MSL. And then it's interchangeable.
Well, it's not interchangeable for us until we have that statement from the
Yes, I understand, but
FAA that they're misusing.
I'm talking to make it,
Yes,
I'm trying to like make it easier for us to understand it and easier for them to make sure what is submitted to them is what I just mentioned.
Okay,
It's-
whatever it takes to clarify this in as many words as necessary when you apply in future to the FAA, I would suggest you actually do that, you know, to say that AMSL is a term under NOAA. I mean, it's another, it's another federal agency that has very specific meaning.
Yep.
And that
Yes.
the determination, if it's in AMSL and it's not referring to a NOAA datum site, then you need to clarify that you would like them to understand that this is an NAVD 88, which is measured off of the St. Lawrence River or whatever you want to say, right? It's something where it's really clear, because right now we're like all over the place and more confused than we ever were before. It never occurred to us that an agency this important doesn't know like what the meaning of a basic term.
Yeah, let's move to the next next piece, because this is the piece that I'm like eager to hear about it.
Me too.
The route, the flight route, and how it relates the reference point to the building height.
We calculate that distance to be somewheres around roughly 690, 700 feet.
What's 600? What's 690, 700 feet?
The
The
distance off
location-
center line.
Off center line. Okay.
Okay, so it's not 300. Okay, that's good. Can last time during the last hearing, you said that this building could have been taller if it's built to this criteria.
Yes.
But we recommended, I'm not gonna name the criteria right now, but we recommended that it's being built to this criteria. That's why it's shorter. The first criteria, I understood it as the 1 to 34. The second criteria, which is more stringent, I'm sorry, the second criteria, the more stringent one, is the 162 to 1, which is engine off, one engine down. And as far as I understand, you need to make sure that the building is lower because the plane could descend faster. And that's why you need a shorter building. If the two engines are operative, you're making sure that the plane has the capacity to fly up, and that's why you're going with a steeper surface. Do I understand it right?
Well, the 62.5 is the one engine inoperative OEI surface. And that surface is designed for an aircraft that loses an engine on takeoff, not landing. So that's why the area is designed the way it is. It's a narrow corridor that gives the aircraft enough time to climb. So picture a large 2-engine aircraft, and if it loses one of the engine, the aircraft would want to turn. So they've got to use the flaps and rudder to straighten the aircraft out, and that takes away a lot of energy so that one engine can keep it flying straight and going up, and it can gain altitude. So that's why the Port Authority, in my experience, is very protective of that surface. The FAA, in that surface, it's not a Part 77 surface, so they won't 100% protect for it because they feel like an aircraft can unload passengers and fuel, and then they would have if they lost an engine, they could still climb out of that. But you know, we all fly, so I'm always concerned about that that event happening if I'm aboard an aircraft or anybody that I love.
Unload passengers would be really a drag after takeoff.
But if you're following, I'm sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
If you were following the one engine out, the 61 to 1 or the 62 to 1, this is a flatter service, right?
Yes.
And it's going to result in a shorter building, right?
Yes.
So, and you didn't follow that. You followed the 1 to 34, right?
But because the building wasn't in the corridor.
What is the corridor?
That is that 300 feet wide plus or minus corridor that in that particular point.
So that
it's not in the trapezoid.
So the Port Authority just forced this 162 to that corridor. That's 300 feet wide at the building location. Is that what you're saying?
Well, let me say it again. If you can picture the shape, and I did cover it in my aeronautical impact statement. It runs right down the center line of the runway, extended.
Yes.
And this building is not in that trapezoid.
Right,
So if it's not in the trapezoid, then I don't have to consider it
right,
because it's not an issue.
okay.
But if it was on the issue, then I would have advised the client that he should limit his height to that height.
To 62.
The trapezoid you're talking about at the building location is 300 feet wide. Am I correct?
I believe it's plus or minus 300 feet.
Right, on either side of the center line.
Yes.
On either side. Okay, I got that. So what you followed in your study is the 34-to-1, which resulted in a taller building, right?
Okay. Yeah. The reason.
Correct.
Yes, we recommended the 34-to-1 because there's other issues as you start to go higher. But when I know the question came up is, why did I say that 34-to-1 wasn't the maximum height that the building could achieve? And the reason is you have penetrations to the existing 34-to-1 right now. There are
okay. So you mean when you say penetrations, you mean taller buildings that penetrate that and go even beyond that?
Yes.
The 34.
Yes. So,
okay.
So then you would then calculate the height of whatever slope it would be that you could then stay below that slope based upon the highest object in that area. You've got things
So
like, if I remember correctly from previous jobs, you've got a cement plant and there's a clock tower. There's a few other things that are out there that penetrate the 34-to-1, which would allow you to get higher than that. But there's also other surfaces that we calculate, which are the instrument procedures, which then would become another limit.
So
okay.
Can you just slow down for 1 second? So the building that you recommended in terms of height, it's 300 feet or 290 feet, depending on where you're measuring.
Yeah.
Right? That building touches the bottom of the 34-to-1, or it's well under it?
Yes.
Pretty much
That's
touches
my
it.
question to Mr. Pittman. Does it touch the bottom?
Pretty much touches it.
Touches the 34-to-1.
I think we're 1 foot below the height obstruction limit.
Well,
Scrapes against
when
it.
you say height obstruction, I want to stay on the 34-to-1 discussion. So when you're using this 34-to-1 plane, the building that you recommended be the maximum height was just under the 34-to-1.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So when you said the building could have been 380 feet, if that's what you said, was that because somewhere like the clock tower or something changed the angle of incidence?
No.
Where does 380 come from?
Well, I think 380 applied to the next case that we're going to go over. 350 applies to this one. So if I said 380 in the first one, then since I was doing 2 the same day, maybe I made a mistake.
Okay, but how does this one get to be 350?
Yeah.
For more curiosity.
No, wait. I just need to get this question
Give me
answered.
2 minutes, please.
Okay.
Just 120 seconds. So what you're saying is because there are taller buildings, FAA could allow that building could have allowed this building to go bit taller to penetrate the 134, right?
Yeah, I could have gotten that.
So that's where I need to go back. So now this is where I was trying to slow down, right? So the building is recommended, hits the 34-to-1, but
Yep.
it's possible it could have been built to 350, but you said you would advise your client, don't go to 350 because, and I did understand, because of future desirabilities in terms of flight engineering and so on. However, my question is, how did you get to the 350? Is that because there's a clock tower in the way that creates a new trajectory? Or what's the 350 based on?
It's based on the runway 31 localizer approach. A localizer is a piece of electronic equipment, and this one is an offset localizer, so it's sitting about halfway down the runway. And it puts out a signal that guides the aircraft left or right of the approach course. So the limitation on this approach is basically a required obstacle clearance of 250 feet. So you basically take the minimum descent altitude, which the pilot flies at until he sees reaches a certain point where he would begin his descent. And so you apply from the minimum descent altitude, you subtract 250 feet from it, and you get 350 feet. And that's what it was based upon.
Wow. Okay. Okay. All right. I guess maybe you could show us that math on a diagram, but okay.
But Clyde,
right.
the general idea there is that because there is this instrumentation built into the airport, they'll allow a little bit more leeway in the calculations because there's something that will accommodate it. Whereas an airport that didn't have that kind of instrumentation or whatever you call this localizer would normally just apply the straight approach surface, right? That's what you're saying, I think.
Right, but there's all kinds of different gadgets, if you will, that aircraft pilots use to give them a safe landing and keep them on course. That's just one of them.
I see.
Mm-hmm. But so there's this magic number of 250. That comes from where? Where's the 250 from?
It basically comes from the requirements of the procedure. The procedure, the FAA has decided that a required separation, let's say, of 250 feet between the aircraft, the bottom of the aircraft, and the top of the structure can be 250 feet, and that's safe based on that procedure. Now, there are other procedures, perhaps that number starts to decrease. And now we're getting into some very complicated math.
Yeah. Okay, you don't need to do that. It's hard enough. Okay.
But I think the big takeaway is that we stayed to the lower number and we got our Port Authority approval very quickly. If we tried to do something taller, I think the analysis that Mr. Pittman would have to do will be much harder. It'd be harder to get the FAA to approve it, and then it'll be harder to get the Port Authority to approve it. So it really is all around. You stick to the simple lower number, and everyone says, "Hey, that works." That's like, is that fair, Clyde? I'm just trying to simplify.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. So the short answer on all of what we were trying to understand, because there were the numbers of 34 to 1 and 62 and 50 to 1 and so on, is that this building is proposed to be just under 34 to 1, which was what you recommended they hold, both for ease of FAA approval, but also to ensure the ability in the future to have your RNP approach.
That's right.
Okay.
That is going to be the future of aviation, is going to be using these GPS modeled procedures, and they were going to get more narrower as opposed to wider, and they'll be more precise, and so the plane will probably be landing itself.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay.
But if this building is closer to the center line, from what you're telling, it could have been half high as it is right now, right?
If it was in that trapezoid, then the Port Authority would have probably not given them approval.
So they would enforce the 62 instead of the 34.
That's my understanding from having worked with them before.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And Clyde, that's not the FAA. That would be the Port Authority. We have two levels of review, and the Port Authority is more conservative. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Is there a specific website or reference or whatever where someone can look at these different criteria and like summarize them?
Summarize all the criteria.
There
there are numerous books, technical books that are hundreds of pages thick that cover all these procedures. And 8260.3 E is one, 8260.58A is another one. So if you wanted to peruse through those, that would be worthwhile. And then the engine out, one engine inoperative, I think is AC 91. I can't remember that number.
Okay. But these are related to, like, they change from airport to airport, or they are the same for?
They're not, if you understand that each airport is unique in its configuration and the environment it's in, the parameters that are associated with these procedures are adapted to that particular environment that the airport is in. In other words, if there's obstacles, or I have to make a turn, or I got a waypoint that I fly at a certain elevation until I come to this point and then I can descend. Yes, they're all the same, but it's the environment that they're adapted into that the FAA is one of the functions that they do, and that's done by flight standards, flight procedures.
Thank you. Thank you. I got my 2 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, a little more than 120 seconds. Okay. All right. I really do appreciate this a lot, as always. So just to clear up, just for this final thing, then to get an email from someone at Obstruction Evaluation Group at the FAA, the actual FAA, to confirm the assumption that they're interchangeably using the two terms.
We've already made the request.
Okay, great. And then to put on the drawings some clarification to that effect, that the word AMSL on the final determination does not refer to NOAA terminology, but FAA's own personal terminology, or, you know, polite words to that effect. Okay.
I think we hopefully should get that to you soon. We'd appreciate whatever you can do to schedule us. Yeah. I think we now have to come back for another hearing, it sounds like.
No. Because now we have all the parameters in place. We understand, so we can close this, and we're just waiting for that email that hopefully has some very nice identifier of this FAA person on it. Okay. And yeah, so, but we do need to go to the public. So, and if there's any other questions from commissioners. So this is inviting the public to.
So the application we're discussing is 2020-35 BZ 13618 Maple Avenue, Queens.
So if you'd like to speak on it, then please call the number that was on your screen. That number, 646-558-8656. And at the prompt, enter 998-2164-5560 #. I don't think either of the people who are now in the waiting room are related to that. Okay, so how much time do you think you need, Mr. Colgate or Mr. Pittman?
Let me speak first. As for the drawings, we can get those by tomorrow or the next day. But as for Mr. Pittman, I think he's at the mercy of the FAA, who's a government agency, and it's Veterans Day tomorrow. Mr. Pittman, what's your estimate?
If I can get it this evening or sometime today, I can get it to you tomorrow, because tomorrow's a work day for us. Okay. But I don't know what the gentleman I asked schedule is. I haven't talked to him in a few days. So he may be taking an extra day leave.
Right, okay. So
hopefully by Friday.
From any other commissioners? I don't see everybody here. Gallery. Any other commissioners have questions? No? Okay, So then what I suggest is we close this and we'll put it on for as soon as we can, but it won't probably be the one that's in 2 weeks. It'll be the one in the middle of December for a decision because it's too fast of a turnaround time for the submission. Okay.
Even if we can get it to you by Friday, it's still not enough time, I guess you're saying. Okay.
Because it's not enough time for us to review it and
The
our
process.
council has to be sure that the application is complete. So it puts them in a
Okay,
kind of an extreme.
that's fair.
Okay. All right. So I'd like to make a motion to close.
Chair Perlmutter,
Aye.
Vice Chair Chanda,
Aye.
Commissioner Otley Brown,
Aye.
Commissioner Sheta. Commissioner Sheta,
Aye.
Commissioner Shabeta.
Aye.
Okay. Next item is 20,
Thank you.
Thank you.
2019-74 BZ 11251 Northern Boulevard, Queens. Is this
I think
everyone,
we-
Is this everyone, Mr. Travers?
I believe it is, right, Brett?
Yeah, I am back on now. I got kicked off momentarily, but I'm back on.
Okay, raise your right hand. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before this board and to respond honestly to board member questions? Oh, wait, are we waiting for Mr. Pittman?
Pittman, he's
Mr.
here.
Pittman is there.
He's there.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I do.
Okay. Oh, there he is. Sorry, Mr. Pittman.
No worries.
So, thanks for coming. And I know there's a little bit of a mystery about why we reopened this, but I don't think Mr. Pittman thinks it's a mystery based on the testimony on the prior case, right? So my questions really are for him. And thank you for your testimony earlier. So you explained to us that in the other case, you recommended because of future engineering concerns about it, required navigational performance approaches and engineering concerns about those, that you wanted the building to stay below 34:1 in that other case. So is this building being developed to the 34:1 point?
No,
Okay, so then why isn't this building also a concern about future R&P approaches?
because it's not on the center line, it's not in the trapezoid of where there would be an impact. It's off to the southeast of the airport. And it's just not in any of the trapezoids. It's
Okay,
in-
so when we look at the approach surfaces that you have on your diagrams that are quite wide, those trapezoids, as long as a building is outside of those very wide trapezoids, I think what did we say? It's like 2,000 feet on either side of center line is the trapezoid, the base trapezoid.
The trapezoids, for the most part, depending upon which ones they are, we have the LNAV and VNAV procedures that's in, but it's not in any of the 34:1. It's in the IFR issued areas.
So IFR issued areas allow for what then? What's their?
It would depend upon the procedure, and it depends upon whether it's in a primary area or a secondary area. And this one appears to be in the secondary area and of the LNAV, VNAV type of procedure.
So, and what does that mean if it's in the secondary area?
The secondary area has a slope up. The primary area, you consider it would be, if it's a three-dimensional approach, it would follow basically an approach surface, sloping upward, not at a 34-to-1, but perhaps at a 26 or a 25 or a 23-to-1. It depends upon some complicated formulas defining the elevation of the airport and the lowest temperature that the airport would experience. And one off of the primary surface, which is 0.6 nautical miles wide, we have the secondary area that comes upward and outward from that at I believe it's a 7-to-1 surface slope. It comes up and outward at a 7-to-1. So you have these different slopes, and it appears that the procedure is in the secondary area off of these sloping surfaces. And they're still relatively high, so we limited the surface to the circling height of 380 feet.
Based on a something to one ratio?
No, the circling area expands out from the runways of the airport several miles.
Okay.
And that surface is flat, and it has a limit circling minimum descent altitude that the aircraft comes into the traffic pattern, and it would stay at that level until it was ready to descend to land.
Okay.
And so there's a required obstacle clearance of 300 feet on the circling area. So whatever the plane height is, we subtract 300 feet from that, and then we would, in this particular case, we get a limiting surface of that.
Okay. So that's like the other site that you had a 250-foot subtraction.
This site is this procedure calls for a 300-foot subtraction.
Okay.
I just, I was reminded, I think we didn't open the clay, reopen.
No, we opened it at the review session.
We did. Okay. All right.
Yeah. So, so in terms of when you're talking about the future of aeronautical instrumentation and GPS and so on, is there anything about this location where a tall building might interfere with some type of desired approach?
Well,
We're talking about the last time the sewage treatment plant that exceeds
Right.
50-to-1.
Right. The sewage, the transfer station.
It's transfer station.
Waste transfer station. Yeah, that affected the potential to get a Cat 2 approach into this runway. You've also got departures, and a taller building would than what they asked for would affect the departures perhaps. So it's not so much the landings, because landings usually have to line up with the runway, and they start at a distance out of roughly 5 miles as they make their approach. The location of this would affect a runway 13 departure as it makes as they come out and make a right turn off as they leave 31.
So then how would you determine whether or not the building is affecting departures as proposed?
I do my calculations on a diverse A departure. The diverse A is, there's a certain trapezoid that goes out roughly, well, the aircraft can't make a turn. They're not supposed to make a turn until they've achieved 400 feet above the runway. And at that point, they can then begin to make a turn. So once they've achieved that 400 feet out, or the 400 feet in elevation, that's roughly climbing at 200 feet per nautical mile. So in 2 nautical miles, they should achieve a 400 feet above the runway elevation. They make their turn. And once they're doing that, making their turn, they're in what's considered diverse departure A. And there's a criteria that's based upon what the elevation of the obstacle surface is that goes out to 2 miles. And then I calculate the height there at a rate of, I calculate the height there based on 152 feet per nautical mile climb gradient slope. So what I've achieved at the end of 2 miles would be 304 feet is my clearance. And then I take that number and I hold it, and then I measure from the object to the base of the trapezoid, and I divide that number by 40, and I add the two together and I get my value.
Your height, your ultimate
Your
height.
allowable height, AM above mean sea level,
Right.
or NADV 88.
Or
Okay.
whatever. Right. Okay.
Right.
Would that, go ahead, Chair.
No, fine. Go ahead.
Would that point where the plane starts to make the U-turn, if you take the center line and you project a perpendicular from the Northern Boulevard building perpendicular to that center line, would the point where the plane starts to make the U-turn, would it be past that
Yes.
perpendicular line or before that perpendicular line?
It would be past the center, but past the building quite a bit. And if you recall, in the presentation I made earlier this year, I gave you a picture of the aircraft flights as they flew by the building,
Yes.
and as you recall, you barely could see the building as the aircraft climbed up, and those were actual departures.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. I remember those. Those were great.
Yeah,
Right.
probably that's why this building is tall compared to the other one, although it's much closer. If you look at distance-wise along the center line, it's much closer from Mabel Building to the airport. And even though its height is very comparable to the Mabel Building, so I believe this is because it's like very well off from the center line. In contradiction with the other one. The other one is a bit closer
Close
to the
to
center
the-
line. Like you said. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So the other one is affecting approach, whereas this one, if anything, it might affect takeoff,
Departures.
Yeah.
departure.
Yeah.
But it's
Is it possible to get like some sort of like a copy, or can you send us something that shows these kind of calculations?
Sure.
And this is not a requirement. It's just for my curiosity. Can we get like you did in the other project? You put a very simple equation: distance divided by 34 plus the reference elevation, give you this. Is it possible to do some? I know that it's going to be a bit more complicated, but is it possible to get some sort of like a back of envelope calculation like that?
Yes.
Perfect.
we're
Appreciate
just
it.
trying
Thank
to
you.
be more informed students, really. That's for future use, right? Okay. All right. I think those are actually my questions. I was very confused about the difference in handling of the last case versus this one, and you gave us so much more information on the last one in explaining to us how it's all analyzed, and I just wanted to make sure we hadn't missed anything on this one.
Okay.
Okay, does anybody have any other questions? Okay, I think there's somebody maybe waiting to speak in the waiting room, unless that person's for the next case, don't know. So maybe we open it up to the public.
Okay, the case that we're discussing is 2019-74 BZ 112-51 Northern Boulevard, Queens. You wish to call in at 646-558-8656, and the Zoom meeting ID number is 998-2164-5560.
And while we're at this, there was a submission of this, right? An oath violation payment. That's what,
Yeah, there was a violation that was paid, I believe.
yeah,
Right, Eugene?
There's a payment plan, yeah.
yeah, a payment plan. Okay. What's the terms of the payment plan? Monthly payment. Oh, I see. Okay. Over however many months. Okay.
Chair Perlmutter, we understand the need to reopen the hearing. We know this application has been through quite a bit. Is there any possibility of closing and voting today?
No.
I have to leave it up to council. It's our
Mr.
council
Steinhaus?
who calls this, right? But also,
Just given the circumstances here?
no, I understand that, but it's up to our council. So, and also there's a Fran Huang. Is she with your group?
I do not believe so, no.
Ms. Huang, if you want to speak on this one, please raise your Zoom hand. Maybe not. Okay. Maybe she's calling for the next case. All right. So I'm gonna have to, is Chase available? Where's Chase?
Yeah, I would just ask that the board, as with our practice, would be okay closing but not voting yet today.
Right. So we could put you on for the next hearing, which is November 29th.
November 30th.
Sorry, November 30th. Right.
30th.
But it's just very difficult for us under these conditions to do closed votes.
I appreciate that. It's been very difficult for this applicant as well, but if there's really nothing you can do.
Okay. All right. So I'd like to make a motion then to close.
Chair Perlmutter,
Aye.
Vice Chair Chanda,
Aye.
Commissioner Otley Brown,
Aye.
Commissioner Sheta.
Aye.
Commissioner Shabeta.
Aye.
So we have no new submission. It's just informational submission that, okay.
Yeah, the informational is really for the benefit of the wannabe flight engineers on the board.
And just to clarify, we're not making a submission, right?
Correct. And also to clarify, the submission that was requested was made about the clarification on the surveyor's clarification on the difference between the two datum.
If you don't want to send it to submit, you can send it just to the PM, and that's all. Just not to make it like a formal submission.
Yeah, it's
Just
not
send it
related
to
to this
that.
case.
Yeah, no, understood. We'll get that information to you. Okay, thank you all. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. So I'd like us to take a 10-minute break because it's been 2 hours and 15 minutes since we came. So 10 minutes, so back at 4:25.
Okay.
I reckon I'm done, right?
We're waiting for Marjorie?
We don't have Commissioner Otley Brown either.
Oh, okay. Oh, no, there she is.
There she is. Okay. I guess we're waiting for Chair Perlmutter then. Let's wait for another minute. If not, then after that, let's start swearing in.
Oh, there she is.
I'm
Oh,
here.
there she is. Okay.
Okay, Chase. Okay, we're live. Somebody's got background noise. Did they sort of lose it? There we go. Thank you. We're live, ready to go?
Mm-hmm.
We're live on
No, we're
YouTube.
not live. No.
No, we're not. That's because it says live on YouTube, but it doesn't say live the other way.
Yes, you're live.
We're live? Okay.
We're live? Okay. Okay, so we're back on the record. This new case, item number 33, 2019-278 VZ, 9201 Fifth Avenue, Brooklyn. Todd? Is there
Hi,
Hi, is there anyone accompanying you, Mr. Dale?
it is just me today.
Okay, raise your right hand. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before this board, and to respond honestly to board member questions?
I affirm.
Okay, please
Sorry.
proceed.
Good afternoon, everybody, Chair, Vice Chair, and Commissioners. Hope everybody's well. I did hear comments made at the review session. Hopefully I can address some of those comments. First, and I'm sure we'll digress, but first to perhaps provide some clarification with respect to the community board. We did have an opportunity to meet with the community board twice with respect to this application. To add some clarity with respect to the conditions they put in their recommendation of approval, it was really two key points. One, because of the nature of 92nd Street, and that was where the entrance and exit was proposed, they asked if we would be agreeable to putting up a no left turn sign or a right turn only sign, which we're 100% agreeable to. But the crux of the discussion was with respect to the area that's currently shown to provide 6 accessory parking spots. We had a back and forth discussion, and it was their belief that they actually would prefer to see removal of those 6 parking spots and have the plans revised to provide a drop-off and turnaround area for vehicles that be visiting the site. The property owner is very agreeable to that, but because of the timing of the community board meeting, prior to making any plan revisions, since we had already responded to the notice of comments, the thought was that we would have the initial hearing with the board, discuss it to see if there were any additional plan revisions that would be required or requested that we could incorporate in. So that is the community board input. And just to set it forth, the property owner actually believes that the turnaround, should the board be agreeable to this, depending on how the application goes forward, that the turnaround would actually be better than providing those 6 accessory parking spaces, which would require a redesign of that ground floor area to provide access for vehicles entering and exiting, including the no right turn, the right turn only sign. So hopefully that adds a little bit of clarity to what the community board's position was. I don't know if there's any questions about that. If not, I can move on.
I have a question. You said
Sure.
the community board would be agreeable to a no left or a no right sign? That doesn't make sense.
Well, a no left turn, right turn only. So the idea is that when you're leaving the parking area, which would then become a turnaround area, that you could only go right and basically direct everybody away from the intersection of 5th Avenue and 92nd.
Okay.
That was
okay.
And as said, we were happy to go ahead and put that on the plans, but I've been to enough hearings where we make a change based on the community board, and then the board asks for additional changes, and we thought it was better to wait to incorporate any and all changes into one redesign.
Oh, I have a question also.
Sure.
What's the theory behind providing no parking whatsoever on the site?
Sure. So the math of it is this, and I know this is something that Vice Chair Chanda brought up. The current ratio that determines required parking for the site is based on the C23 district, and the office space and the community facility space, both within the zoning resolution, have a 1 space per 400 square feet current ratio as to how you calculate the required parking for what's proposed. So if you apply that to the total floor area that's proposed, the community facility and the office space together, it comes out to 50 required spaces based on that ratio. The special permit that's being sought under 7344 seeks to adjust the ratio to 1 per 800. So if the findings of 7344 are met, it would change the ratio of required parking calculation to be 1 per 800 square feet. 1 per 800 square feet applied to the proposed floor area, which is just a shade under 20,000 square feet, would then result in 25 required spaces. It is then at the Department of Buildings, because the special permit is granted and the ratio is changed, those 25 required spaces then could be waived under section 36231, which is the waiver provision that applies to certain categories of proposed uses.
Mr. Dale, the 7344 1:8 is only for ambulatory and diagnostic, so it wouldn't apply to the commercial space.
It would apply to the office spaces also. 7344, double check here. It says for anything that is in a parking requirement category B1 in use group 6, 7, 8, 9,
Okay.
10, 11, 14. So it would apply to both.
Okay.
It applies to offices and community facility, but not retail.
Correct, 100%.
Okay.
And the theory behind the 7344, it's a recognition, by the city council enacting this provision, is that, use group 6, notably, but parking requirement category B1 is a wide swath of parking or uses that fit under that particular parking category. And this special permit recognizes that these two particular uses, or that these particular B1 uses, have less required parking and less demand for parking. And rather than just change the parking requirement category, you apply for the special permit, and that the specific findings that the board is required to find, good faith basis of evidence that these are the uses that are contemplated, and then also a condition on any certificate of occupancy that would be issued. Meeting those findings allows for a change in the ratio that is applied to determine the required parking. So I think, as was stated by, I apologize for who, it would be a two-step process. That this application is for the board, for the special permit. We believe we meet the findings that would allow for the change in the ratio. And then it is up to the Department of Buildings to apply section 36231 to the proposed development based on that changed ratio.
I've forgotten whether you've done any of these applications before. Have you? For us?
I have done many during my time, not one recently. I am familiar with a number of cases like this that have been before the board, though.
In the last few years?
To be honest, I'm not sure the last time we did a special permit. It may have been a couple of years ago. Yes.
Has Mr. Dale reviewed the Wortman decision?
I am actually very familiar with the Wortman decision because our firm is involved in pending litigation regarding that decision.
Okay, which we're not discussing, obviously, but it's well within the board's purview to impose safeguards and conditions, which obviously can include a minimum number of required parking spaces.
I would respectfully disagree with that. There are conditions under 7303 that apply to all special permits, but the two pertinent sections, subdivision A and subdivision D, I think clearly show that the conditions that the board can and should set forth the special permits granted don't apply to the total amount. There's no reference at all to the number of spaces. 7344 is just a ratio. It makes no determination whatsoever with respect to whether it's 1, 10, 25, or 100 spaces. If you look at section 7303 subsection D, there are times where the board is required or set forth to reference parking studies by the Department of Transportation for different special permits. And notably, the special permits that are referenced in that section are not 7344. The rooftop parking, 7349, I forget what the other two are, but they're not
What about
this particular section.
7303A?
I'm sorry?
7303A.
7303A actually says that the board should be examining the uses with respect to, hang on a second. I think I've got 73 up there. With respect to the special permits that are granted, with reference to privacy, quiet, light, and air, none of which directly apply to the number of spaces.
No, I'm talking about the modification of parking regulations at the particular site are outweighed by the advantages to be derived by the community by the grant of such special permit. And then in 7304, conditions and safeguards may prescribe such conditions and safeguards to the grant of special permit as it may deem necessary in the specific case in order to minimize the adverse effects of such special permit upon other property and the community at large, which would clearly include the imposition of a minimum number of required parking spaces to the extent that the board determines from evidence in the record that the use would generate a certain amount of parking. And so is there anything else that to really be added to this discussion right now?
I would respectfully disagree with the reading there. The reading 7303 and 7304, when you set forth with respect to the conditions, those would generally apply to like the design of the lot or fencing or lighting or any issues with sound. There's nothing about the specific amount that comes forth. And there's nothing within 7344 or these sections that sets forth numbers or levels or quantities that if I could finish
parking
speaking,
on the street
if I could finish
clearly
speaking,
be an
if I could finish
adverse
speaking.
effect.
You know, if you want to interrupt me, that's fine, but then I prefer not to be chastised if I'm speaking. Right? I would just say that those particular sections don't set forth any quantity, and we believe that that is very clear within the plain language of the section.
Okay, so but to jump to the chase on this one, so to speak, sure. Our authority is only to grant a waiver that allows a 1 per 800. That is therefore 25 spaces, assuming you're able to make the findings. Therefore, we need to see drawings that show a building with 25 spaces, and that's what we approve. And so then you're confronted with the Department of Buildings reviewing our approved plans and not seeing that you're submitting drawings for plans that we approved, at the very least, independent of statements by our counsel that I agree with, that we have the authority to limit to issue additional safeguards or clarify in our resolution exactly what the terms of the grant are. And we've done this often in the past, and only in very rare cases have we understood in existing construction. So in very rare cases where you've got like a 25 by 100 existing building that came for a waiver, where it was a physical impossibility to put any parking whatsoever, those were cases where the board could kind of understand further relief somehow from the board, but we from the DOB. But we are not able to be looking at that. Our limitation is our authority to a maximum of 1 per 800, assuming the findings. And we also lay on top of that, because our findings are influenced by analysis, demand studies and parking studies, and we don't have any of those. So we're not obliged to issue the 1 per 800. It could be that we say, demand shows there's a need for 35 cars, in which case you must provide 35 cars, and then that eliminates any waiver possibility. So you are really jumping the gun on this without having given us any support on this case for anything. And a parking demand study is like ABC on these cases, and you were asked to provide it in the notice of comments and didn't provide it.
I understand what you're stating there. I would say that, you know, this situation where the special permit has been granted by the board and then there's been a further reduction of the Department of Buildings has happened on numerous other occasions with applications that have come before the board. You know, at least 6 or 7 that we found within the last 15 years or so where it's been done. So it has been a practice and it's not been an issue before. With respect to the
Sorry, it has been an issue before. It's been an issue for at least the last 4 years where this board has taken a stern position that double dipping, going from one agency to the next, where all of our analysis under seeker review were relevant and under neighborhood character and all of the other parameters, particularly the the demand studies, determined a certain number of parking spaces, and that was what the demand required. Demand was reflected, and therefore the board determined that that was the number of spaces that had to be provided. And so I agree that there's no purpose in continuing with this case unless you provide us with parking studies, the as of right amount of parking shown because that's what we always look at, show us compliance with the regulations and show us then compliance with our authority to grant a maximum of 50% reduction. And then that needs to be supported by a demand study, and then we see. But if you're not willing to do that, there's no case here, and then we would just have to close.
No, I understand what you're saying. With respect to the parking demand study, in our response, we did reply that according to seeker standards, that this doesn't meet any thresholds for transportation parking. If I could finish with transportation or parking studies, and that was the decision that was made by the development team. I've heard what you said here. I would like the opportunity to go back to the property owner based on the statement you just made and explain that, you know, you said it here on the record for the hearing, that that's what the board's current position is. And I provide the opportunity to them to reconsider the decision if they want to provide the parking study in excess of seeker requirements. With respect to the plan design, you know, I understand what you're saying with respect to the approved plans, but if the Department of Buildings is willing to grant the waiver, I realize we're not there yet, but should the special permit be granted to reduce required parking from 50 to 25 based on the adjustment of the ratio, that if plans were presented showing those 25 spaces, if the Department of Buildings then were willing to waive those 25 spaces, which is possible because it would be in their purview, the question would be, how then would those plans be able to be reviewed by Department of Buildings? So, you know, I understand what you're saying about show us a plan that shows 25 spaces, but if the realistic end result is to seek the special permit and then the waiver, where 0 spaces would be provided, assuming that we met with the community board's conditions, I guess I failed to see what the purpose of the 25 space design plan would be, knowing what the end result would be. I mean, and I'm happy to take, you know, feedback from that, but it just seems nonsensical to provide something that would just need to be changed or revised anyway.
It isn't nonsensical because the board's authority is only to grant 25 spaces, and without a plan that shows compliance with the board's authority, there's no approval.
I respectfully disagree that the board's authority is to grant a special permit to reduce the ratio. It has nothing to do with a specific number.
Sorry. The board's authority requires approval of a set of drawings. If the drawings don't show compliance with the board's approval and a believable plan, which we often comment on, so we'll often comment that the maneuverability on the plan is not believable, that access to the street by the parking is somehow disruptive to the traffic network, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The board looks at a lot of things during these parking studies and these parking waivers. And you have to show a plan that is believable. And then I'm just not going to get into that the board can limit its authority. It can limit, based on the demand study, the number of parking spaces that are required to be provided based on its authority. So we don't need to go around and around and around.
No, understood.
Go back to your client and say, you need to provide a plan that shows 25 believable parking spaces and a demand study, and then we can have a hearing on this case.
I understood. You've made the points very clear, and I think we've made our position clear, and we'll go back to the property owner with those 2 points with respect to the board's request for a parking study and a corresponding plan that relates to showing spaces on the site.
Okay, great. So,
Chair, if I may, please.
Go ahead.
Mr. Day, are you aware of anywhere in the zoning resolutions that gives us the authority to waive more than 50% of the required? If the answer is yes, please cite a section.
To waive, so the authority of the
50%.
board to waive
yes,
more than
let's say the required, let's say before the waiver, the required is whatever. We're authorized, as far as I understand, to waive 50% of that.
The board is
you aware
authorized
of-
under 7344 to waive the ratio, irrespective of what number that applies to.
From what to what?
It doesn't, it varies depending on the situation. The 7344 allows for a change of a ratio from 1, in this particular instance, from 1 per 400 to 1 per 800 square feet, which would be the 50% ratio. It doesn't make any specific reference to the number of spaces whatsoever, whether it's 5 spaces, 10 spaces, or 1,000.
Yes, but 1 to 800 would be much more than what you're proposing, right?
Yes, it's 25 spaces and they're proposing 6.
Yeah. Yes.
So
correct.
What we're seeking through the special permit in the C23 district per 7344 is a change from 1 per 400 square feet proposed to 1 per 800 square feet proposed. That's
which is how
what we're
many?
seeking.
Which is how many spaces? Which is how many spaces?
Applied to this particular building, that would be
Yes.
from 50 spaces to 25 spaces.
And this is our authority, right?
The board's authority is to grant that special permit should they believe that the specific findings have been met to change from the 1/400 to 1 per 800. Yes.
This is the farthest we can go. If you want to submit drawings, it need to have the 25 spaces. In addition to that, it's not guaranteed that the board gonna grant 25 spaces. We have to look at something scientific and then make a decision. Before that, like the chair said, we don't want to waste your time nor our time.
And I understand it. I'm not,
Right.
just to make it very clear, we're not asking the board to do anything beyond that 1 per 800. The waiver under 36231 would be the purview of the department.
No, so I think we've discussed this enough. We don't need to
Sure.
keep beating this horse. I'm feeling
If the
sorry for
DOB
it
is
already.
willing to
So-
take our drawings, if DOB is willing to take the drawings that approved by the BSA that contains 25 spaces and switch that to -5 spaces, it's up to them. It's not
Well,
up
no,
to us.
not actually, not if we
No.
had a condition of approval. And by
Yeah,
the
I
way, this
understand.
board has, for the last at least 4 years, conditioned all approvals on the number of spaces shown on the drawings being
Yes.
provided,
Yep.
because it's based on a demand study. That's the whole point, that it's not up to them. We've done an analysis, and the demand study will say there's demand for this many parking spaces, therefore you must provide that, right? And if demand turns out to be 30 spaces, then it's 30 spaces, right? So it
You know
isn't.
what, Chair,
I think that we, I
even if we
really,
don't specify,
Yeah, okay, I think we're done with this, really. I don't want to keep going on and banging it.
Chair, I very clearly understand what you're saying.
Okay, good. All right. So I'd like to go to the public. If there's public who'd like to speak, there's one person in the waiting room named Fran Huang, who's been here for a very long time.
Not with our team.
Okay,
Registered for another case,
what other case?
a prior case. I think she was part of the applicant team.
Oh, maybe it, okay. So she seems to just be floating in the Zoom room. All right, let's see if there's anybody from the public who wants to speak, put on the display.
Okay, this case is calendar number 2019-278BZ, The address is 9201 Fifth Avenue, Brooklyn. If you wish to call in, it's 646-558-8656. Zoom meeting ID number 998-2164-5560.
Okay, so Mr. Dale, how much time? I just realized it just says Todd there on your screen. I should have changed your name. Last name.
I'm very used, I've got 2 first names and 2 last names. It's been my whole life. switching.
Okay. Dale Todd. Okay. So how much time do you think?
I would say that, again, we can be flexible with the board schedule, considering the holidays are coming up and, the items that were requested, that a submission date at minimum in January.
Okay. Okay. Great. All right then. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
That's it? Yep. So this concludes the public hearing for November 10th, 2020, 2 p.m. session.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hi, everyone.